Yo, 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 what's up, good people? Again, welcome to the Life Expectancy Chart. I tried to draw this on the big boy board, man, to kind of let you guys see exactly what we do and what's going on here, man. Give me 1 second here. Let's try to kill some of this noise here. And so, pretty much, man, what we're doing here, as you can see, we have three averages. We have the world average, is 71. We have the USA average, which is 80. And then we have sort of like the God average, right? The biblical average, and that's 120 years old. And you can use any one of these, but to really truly get a great depiction of where we are, I would suggest you use the 120. And the reason why you're supposed to use the 120, or it's better to use the 120, it just gives you a wide array of possibilities, and it also too leaves room for us to be able to see the bigger picture, and we can kind of fit ourselves into the 120 a lot easier. Some people live longer than 70 years old, some people live longer than 80, but we rarely live past 120. And since that is the biblical God-given life expectancy, that's probably what we should be pursuing instead of the shorter lifespan. So, let's keep on pursuing 120 instead of 70 and 80. How about that? And so as you see, if we do it by the 120, then now you see that full circle ends at 120 years old. Then you have from 0 to 5, right? 0 to 5 years is your brain development. That's your 10-year mark. So from 0 to 10 years old, you are in Aries. And pretty much what that is saying is that that is pretty much your development stage. It's pretty much when you're mostly consuming information, right? Mostly learning in the first 10 years, all right? 10 to 20 years old, you're learning how to communicate that which you have been learning. So now the focus is on articulation and the communication of that which you have learned. You're finding a lot of times here, this is when teenagers begin to kind of get their self-identity and begin to tell you what they will and won't do. That's when they start to communicate, right? They start to communicate from 20 to 30 years old, right? 20 to 30 years old, this is your working years. Gemini, this is when you're really using your hands and your arms to produce. So we like to call that your working years. And as you can see here, this red line means 25 years old. So from 25 to 35, you're in a transition period, right? You see that? Transition period, right? And it's what we call the midlife crisis. See that? That's your midlife. That's your midlife crisis. So from 25 to 35, you're in a transitionary period, right? Moving from the spring of life over into the summer of life, right? And you don't normally get out of this particular one until 40 years old. See, it starts from 30 to 40. So from 30 to 40, you are in Cancer. And what that is meaning is that still working, you're still doing what you got to do. But at this particular time, you're putting more heart into that which you're doing. So it's like at first you start working with your hands and you just start doing the thing, and then you start falling in love with what you're doing. Okay, start falling in love with what you're doing, and you start getting a little bit more confident in that which you know. You start to professionalize yourself, and you start to kind of get inundated and get more experience with what it is that you are tasked to do. So this is kind of your professionalism starts to come into play here between 30 and 40 years old. And then from 40 to 50, these are your golden years. This is why you call them the golden years, because this is Leo. So this is the best time. This is when you're, the season and you're ready to go. Too many people can't tell you about your career. Too many people can't tell you about kids. Too many people can't tell you about work and home life and all that, because you've done it by this time. You've been here now. All right. So this is kind of when you're in your bread and butter years. You're 40 to 50. That's your bread and butter years. You're pretty much a professional at life itself or at a career at about this time in life. Okay. 40 to 50. All right, from 50 to 60 years old here, now you're into Virgo. So if you're 50 to 60 years old, you're currently in Virgo. All right, and 60, as you can see here, 55 to 65, you're in a transition period, right? This is what we like to call the retirement transition, where you start to get things together and you start to get your inheritances, okay? Virgo is known as the breadbasket, right? All right. Libra is known as the scales. So if you picture that, you're bringing in your bread, and now it's time for you to put it on the scale, weigh it out, and cash out. So most of the time, your working years begin to diminish around this time. And as you can see, 60 is a major transition. So therefore, that's why this is called the retirement time. The retirement time, major transition from basically from work life, okay? From work life to home life. All right. 70 years old, Scorpio, from 70 to 80. From 80 to 90, you're in Sagittarius. From 85 to 95, you are in a transition period. This transition period is what we like to call the restructuring period, right? Restructuring yourself, kind of downsizing. This is your elder life. So you're definitely downsizing. You're definitely preparing for the winter, all right? Because now at this particular age, normally there's not too many people working past 90, okay? So this is why we call this the winter of life, because there's no production here, all right? This is when you're constricted and you can't really do what you normally would have been doing in the previous time of life, okay? And so on and so forth. And so you go into 100, 115, back to 120, which is what we like to call full circle. So these are the transitions of life. From 0 to 5, you're talking about brain and birth development, right? But from 0 to 10 is your whole when it's focused more solely on learning, right? You're consuming more than trying to articulate that which you're consuming. But the transitionary period is from 0 to 5, most critical time in any young human's development. That's your transition period. 25 to 35, we like to call the midlife. 55 to 65, we like to call the retirement. 85 to 95 is your restructure period. And 115 and up, you're coming into full circle of life. And this is how you know where you are. So if you got a young person that's before 30 years old, they're in the spring of their life. From 31 to 60, you're in the summer of your life. Prime time. Prime time, Deion Sanders. From 31 to 60, prime time of your life. From 61 to 90, you're in the fall of life. You're in the decline. Okay? And then from 90 to 120, you are in the winter of life. Restricted, constricted, not as flexible to do and go as you would like. But you're still here, you're still growing. And when you get about 115, you'll begin to go into another transition period. And to me, that transition period is why I made this whole thing anyway. To me, that transitionary period is when we are illuminated and enlightened. And if any one of you guys are saying, well, where you get the 120 from? The Bible says 75. 75 to me is a percentage. Your body has 75% water. The earth has 75% water. And that 75 to me only meant that you were promised to at least have 3/4 of this, right? 3/4 of this is promised to you. Okay? So 75 will literally be right in the middle of Scorpio right here. Right? Because that's 70. That line right there is 70. If you can see my finger, that line right above my finger is 70. So the midway point would be 75. All right? 75 years old in Scorpio. But look at all that stuff you got left that you haven't experienced, right? I just told you that there's only one recorded woman in history that went 122 full circle. There's only one Asian man who went to 116. So for the most of us, we don't know how it feels to get into this transitionary period. We don't know what that comes about. But I figured that if you start here and you go all the way around here and end back up the way you started from, that is considered the full circle of life, the higher self, the illumination. So now you say, well, what is the benefit of this? To know where you are in life on a yearly basis and even on a daily basis. So what does that mean? If I am here in life, so I am 39 years old, right? This is 40. So I'm about right in here. I'm in the Cancer of life. But if you look at this carefully, that means that I'm in the summertime, right? The Cancer of life means that I'm in the summer of life. All right. Now, every day you wake up, the sun comes up here at 6 a.m. See that? 6 a.m. It rises, by 7 is right here. By 8 o'clock it's now going into Taurus. By 10 a.m. it's going into Gemini. By 11 it's in Gemini. By 12 it's going through the transition into Cancer, right? So I'm 39 years old. So basically what this is telling me is that, see, I'm right here. So maybe every day around close to 2 o'clock is a great time for me to meditate, to pray. See what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to do is catch every time things hit on 39, right? Every time the clock strikes on 39, boom. Every time the clock strikes on my year, every time the clock strikes on where my positioning is at, that may be something good for me. You see what I'm saying now? So now you're having an ability to position yourself somewhere here on this map, and then now coordinate it and say, okay, every time that everything lands on my time of the day, on my time, on my positioning, right? In my positioning, that may be beneficial to me in life. That may be a great time for me to pray. That may be a great time for me to just look at myself and peep myself out. Am I right around 2 o'clock? Is where I'm at my best, right? Is that where I'm at my best? Or is that where I'm at my worst? You see what I'm saying? So now when you're able to position yourself here, and then you're able to use the clock, then you match both of those up. Okay, to where I'm at in a yearly basis to where I'm at in every day. So maybe now if I add that all up, or if I accumulate that understanding, it may be some positives that can happen for me every time I know when the coordinated time matches up with my positioning in life. In life. This is why this is so important. And this is why I call it the life expectancy chart. Because you can literally begin to start maximizing your health. You can start maximizing your manifestations here on earth. And you can start navigating through life a whole lot easier. This has been your boy, man. Until next time, I love y'all, and it ain't nothing you can do about it. Peace.